Tonight we're going to service this Mitsubishi. This is an HSU, I think it's 55. Yeah, HSU 55. It's a basic VHS hi-fi machine. This machine is functional. I have not created any faults in this one, but we will on a future video. This one just needs a general overhaul. This is something that you should be doing for preventative maintenance, because what happens on these machines is they get gummed up. Now this is a very good mechanism. As you can see, this one's kind of gummed up as it is. I'm having to pry tapes out and stuff. This is a very good mechanism on this one. This is one of these mechanisms. It's a solid aluminum die-cast chassis. One of the best that has been made. Mitsubishi used this on a huge number of machines. All their great machines use this chassis. But what does happen is certain parts, like the P6 guide here, have a tendency to get sticky. You see that? That's starting to gum up. That should snap back instantly, but it's not, because what's happening is the lubricant underneath this bearing post here is starting to dry out. Other problems that these ones have is that the tower gear gets gummed up, and well, I'll show you. We're gonna lubricate this machine top and bottom. This is something that should be done on these machines, just because it causes so many problems. This black grease that's on here, this molybdenum grease, it's a graphite type molybdenum type grease that gets dry and sticky. So that should be taken off and replaced with a different type of grease. Normally the Molykote yellow grease is a lot better. As you can see on this one here, I've already taken the liberty of removing the head cleaning wheel. A lot of these machines had an automatic head cleaner. It was a little wheel that would make contact with the head as the tape was loading and unloading. And after a while, that little wheel would get dirty, and it would actually put more crap, more dirt back on the heads. So a little foam wheel, and the little foam wheel deteriorated, and it would contaminate the heads more than it was cleaning. This head's been replaced on this one. This is an aftermarket head that's on here. I know that because I can see the little stamp from the retailer, the parts department that sold it, and I replaced this head years and years ago. There are other problems that these machines have. These ones are prone to these capacitors leaking on them too. They haven't gone on this one yet. This is a good old linear power supply. I love these power supplies. They don't give a lot of problems, but these capacitors are known to go bad and they start to leak. No indication that that's happening at this point on this one. But keep that in mind if you've got video problems, or if your on-screen display on the front here isn't working, like the fluorescent display, chances are you're going to find some capacitors leaking. They do have a tendency to leak the electrolytic on them. I don't see any sign of that on this particular one yet. I see a bunch of dirt and cat hair and stuff that's in there, which is fairly normal on these machines. I don't know where I got this. This was given to me many, many years ago. Anyway, I've already taken the liberty of opening this machine up so that we can get at it to access it. So I'm going to put the camera back on the sticks, and we're going to start by lubricating the capstan, the pinch roller, post, and bearing assembly. So the first thing we do is we're going to take off the pinch roller assembly. We just need a screwdriver to pop off the I guess this would be called a snap ring on this one, or well, it's not an E-clip. It doesn't look like an E-clip. This is more of a snap ring. There actually is a tool you can use to remove them. I just pop it off with a screwdriver. We lift off the pinch roller assembly. Now this pinch roller assembly has also been replaced. I know that because the original one, this wasn't a green color, it was a white color, and this would break. What would happen on these is the grease on this post dries out, and this no longer can slide up and down. So as the machine is trying to load, as the main tower gear, the tower cam gear is pulling the pinch roller into place, it freezes and breaks. So this one's been replaced, but whoever replaced this put the same kind of grease on it that it had at the factory, and that stuff is no good. That black graphite-based grease dries up and it'll have exactly the same problem as before. Another piece that we need to lubricate is that P6 guide post, which is the one that's down here, which you can't see from where the camera angle is, but I have to actually remove this white gear, and that's done just by rotating the gear out of position. You can just lift this up. Now there is an alignment procedure though. Once you've done that, there is an alignment hole on here that has to line up, otherwise you're never going to get this thing back in place. And it's like that. That last tooth lines up. So to take this off, just raise the gear out of place, or raise the guide post out of place, and you can just lift this up out of the way. This needs to be lubricated here. That black grungy grease has to come out, and we got to do the same here on this one. Now to do that, I actually have to remove this guide. That requires an alignment though, because once I remove that guide post, once I loosen off this nut, the vertical clearance of this is going to be incorrect. So once that happens, you have to get the alignment correct or it's going to damage the tape. So we need to do a minor tape path alignment once we take that off. Now sometimes you can avoid taking this off and just get some oil down into the bearing here. Whoops. Oh, also turn your power off when you're doing this, because I just interrupted the tapes. I just interrupted the optical sensor here, and the thing tried to load. Sometimes you can get into here and just get some oil in here, but that's not the right way to do it. The right way to do it is you got to take this guide post right out, and once you've taken out the guide post, you can clean the grease off of there and re-lubricate it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to remove this and we're going to re-lube this guide post. So I'm just trying to angle the unit so that you can see what I'm doing here. So I'm just going to turn the nut on top here to remove ouch. Now there is a spring on this, so you got to be sure that you get the spring back in the right place to pull this back into place, to pull the guide back into its rest position. This is a self-locking nut that I'm taking off. That's why it's so slow to remove it, because it actually has a nylon locking collar on it. Sometimes these are called aircraft bolts. You'll see here, I don't know if I can get a shot of that or not, but that's the, there's the little nylon locking collar for this nut. Once we've removed the nut, we can lift the guide post off. There is a spring that does not come off, and I'm being careful not to lift up the tower gear here, because this is all timed. What we want to clean is we want to clean the crud off of this post here that gets dried out, and we want to clean the back end of the bearing here and just re-lubricate it. So I'm just going to grab something to clean that with. Actually, I have something here, a Q-tip. Use any good quality cleaner. Alcohol works just fine. Your isopropyl alcohol that you would use for like cleaning heads or any of that other stuff, that's going to work just fine to clean this grease off of the affected posts. So just moisten your swab and clean the grease. Clean the main post here as well for your pinch roller assembly. On the pinch roller assembly, we want to clean this. We want to run the Q-tip through and try and clean out this bearing here. Push it through to clean the interior of the bearing. But we also want to clean, we want to take off this spring, because what happens is the action of the pinch roller here, the slip between the pinch roller and this plastic and between the other plastic here, the other plastic collar, that also binds up, and that'll end up with causing it to stick, especially when the pinch roller tries to release and it's cammed in like that, and when it goes to release, it sticks. It doesn't release back. See, when it's engaged to play a tape and the mechanism goes to release and the spring can't pull it back, the edge of the pinch roller here will catch underneath here as it's trying to raise it, and that will cause it to break too. So that's typically the surface between these two plastic collars. So we take the springs off and we take the pinch roller assembly apart and lubricate it. We take it apart, we clean this surface here. The same for the white gear here. But I just kind of buggered up my spring here, so I gotta put a little hook back in the end of it here so that I can reattach it. There, that fixes that. So we're gonna do the same on this other assembly. I'm going to remove this other spring at the back side here. Might do it better. This is a stronger spring. We'll just use the needle nose for this one. So now we can clean this post. This one's not too bad on this. Sometimes they're really, really bad, and they get very sticky. So we're just going to clean that post off and clean the inside of the pinch roller. On this video, I'm only doing the top side of this mechanism, so you'll have to tune back in for another video where we do the slide assembly on the bottom. So I'm just doing, on this video, I'm just going to do the pinch roller and the P6 guide. That'll be enough for this one, and we'll do another one for the bottom side. But let me assure you that the bottom side of this chassis needs to be lubricated every bit as much as the top side, because it's got that same crappy graphite based grease. So we'll just put a little bit of Moly Coat PG 641 is what I use. This is the grease when these pinch rollers were available from Mitsubishi. When these broke in the field, this came in a kit to repair these units. And throughout the years, you'd never ever use the whole package, right? So you'd always just use a little bit. I ended up with a fair bit of the stuff, so I just collected the stuff from what I didn't use. I changed literally over the course of the years I was in the business, I changed thousands upon thousands of these pinch roller assemblies. So it was a very common failure on these. Okay, that guide goes back in, or that piece goes back in onto the pinch roller assembly. We'll put our spring back on like that. Put a little more lube here on the bottom half of the collar. Then we can put the bottom half of our pinch roller back on, make sure that that's nice and free, and then we can put our spring back on here. When you're putting these springs on, be sure you hold your finger over one side of it just in case it slips, so you don't end up searching for a spring that's going to fly across the room. Okay, now we've got our spring back in place. We'll just clean off any of that grease that's on the plastic pieces here. And we'll clean off the grease from the tower gear because it's going to be re-lubed as well. We're also going to put some grease on the loading gear. This little worm gear here on the loading motor, as you can see, this gets gummed up and causes the drive motor to stick, which could and has burned out drive motors in the past. We need to clean out the grease from inside here. Best way to do that is to use the cardboard from a Q-tip. So just cut the end off that one that you just used and got all black, and you can shove that through here, and that'll polish up and clear all the crap that's in. It's just about the right size to scrape out any of the crud that's inside this bearing. If you want to put some cleaner on there too, some alcohol, that might help. We get our moly coat grease. Just put a little bit of grease inside so that when you place this down over the shaft on the VCR, it'll lubricate the shaft. Now remember, there is a spring here, so we do have to get the spring. We do have to load the spring. We have to pull the spring back so that it will pull the guide back into place. The spring just locks in. There's a little tab on the right there. The spring just goes into that position. So we drop the guide back in place. And as you can see, I missed the spring. So I gotta grab my dental tools here this time to do it, I think. And now it holds the guide in place. And now we just have to put our nut back on top and screw it down. Now this is where the alignment is going to be required for this. If the guide is riding too high or riding too low, it's going to chew up the tape. So when you first put a tape in and run it, you're going to have to observe what's happening with the tape. And then make adjustments accordingly. If the guide is riding too high, it's going to cause the bottom edge of the tape to curl. If the guide is riding too low, it's going to cause the top edge of the tape to curl. A lot of times it's easier to remove the front lid from the tape when you do this, because the lid on the front of the cassette is likely going to be in the way as far as adjusting this goes. You'll see once I get it loaded. You'll see what I mean. So now we can take our pinch roller assembly don't need to run that anymore, it's nice and warm in here. We can put a little bit of our moly coat grease into the bottom of the bearing here, and we'll put a little more of it onto the surface that makes contact with the tower gear, and even a little bit more onto the tower gear itself. I'm putting a very small amount because this machine's not going to be seeing much use. I just want to kind of give the basic idea what you need to do. Don't put too much grease on either. Too much grease is worse than not enough. We can drop our pinch roller assembly back down onto its retaining post. I'm just wiping some grease on here. There we go. And the top, whoops, wait a minute. I just made a mistake. Nope, gotta put the fan gear in place first. Our fan gear also needs to be cleaned. Just shove a dry Q-tip through there, clean out the grease there. This sits on the same post as the pinch roller, and I just lubricated that, so I'm good on there. And we just have to line this up like that. I don't know if you saw that or not, but that's the correct alignment position right there when it's unloaded. You just lift your guide up so that you can clear the cam, drop the teeth on, and then it's just the last tooth lines up. Actually, we're not quite, I'm off by one. I gotta go back one tooth. Like that. So that's the correct position there. The little alignment mark here, the hole points to the last tooth. And you can see how that snaps back into place now. Whereas before, when I released it, it would come back slowly. And of course, when it gets gummed up, what happens when that's coming back slowly? Okay, the guides release. This is expected to drop back immediately. It doesn't, it's still out like this when the machine kicks the tape out, and you end up with tape sticking out of the end of the cassette. That's the symptom when that gums up. Put that back on, pinch roller. Put our lid lifter. This is actually the lid lifter here. When the cassette goes in, there's a little button that gets pressed on the right side of the cassette to release the lid. This is actually the arm that flips open the tape lid, the lid lifter. Put the lid lifter back on there and drop back on your clip. And now we can turn this thing on. So our tape threads up, and we need to adjust the position of this guide so that it doesn't chew up the tape. But if you look, I can't get at, well, I guess I can get at the nut here. Whoops. I was thinking I was going to have to remove this lid, but I can actually see it right here. So let me see if I can get the camera in position so that you can see what it is I'm doing. You're probably not going to be able to see it because it's right in, well, here, we'll just move the camera again so you can see what I'm up against. The guide that needs to be adjusted is the P6 guide, which is this one here that we lubricated, and it's right in behind here. So this is where I'm going to be looking. When I put it in play, I'm going to be looking for it chewing up the top or bottom edge of the tape. And if the tape is riding up or down, actually I may have got it right. I may have got this right just by guessing. But typically if you're too high or too low on the adjustment here is right there. You can see the nut right down in here. That's the adjustment for the height. If you're too high or too low, what's going to happen is the tape is going to ride up or ride down that guide, and it's going to damage the tape. So ideally what you want to do, and I know this probably looks upside down on the camera because I'm holding the camera upside down. Let's turn it around here. Try and keep power on here without here's our guide down here. And as you can see, the tape is not really curling or anything on there. It's actually looking to be pretty good. I'm now into reverse search. Looks like we may be a little bit high. If I'm watching the tape, when I go, I'm in the reverse direction now. When I go forward, looks like it's pulling the tape down a little bit. I can see a bit of a wrinkle. So I might be a little bit high on that guide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and just bring that up a I'm running into problems with my incandescent light. When I broke the light beam there, it interpreted it as a tape beam at the end. But I'm just going to bring that guide up maybe a half a turn on this adjustment. That'll bring my height up a little bit on that guide, and then we'll just try going into play and then forward search and reverse search again. So there's play. See, it's still pulling the tape down. So I'm still a little bit, I'm too low. If it's pulling the tape down, my guide is down too far. So I back off the screw here by maybe another turn or so. And then we'll try it again. And what we want to do ideally is we want the tape to stay see, it's pulling the tape down. So therefore, if it's pulling the tape down when it's in play, it's too low. So I got to come up again with the guide. So I'm just bring it up another. I'm going like one full turn at a time. Okay, that's actually, I guess, about 3/4 of a turn on the nut here. And again, we look at the tape. Okay, now I might be too high. Now you can see I'm too high. You can see the bottom edge of the tape. It's curling, and when I go into reverse search, you can see it pulling the tape. So I'm too high, so I got to go the other way. And this is just a trial and error. It's a little easier if you have a nut driver with that size of of socket, but I don't. Okay, try it again. I'm too high. And I can actually see the bottom edge of the tape rippling. If you look at the tape as it's playing there, or, yeah, I'm too high, I gotta go down. I gotta turn it clockwise. So I'm taking the guide post down. Now you might wonder, why is this important? Why are we worried about this? Because the bottom edge of the tape is where the control track is recorded. So if you damage the bottom edge of the tape, you're going to affect the ability to play tapes back. So you want to try and get this as close as you can to being correct. There we go. Now it's getting much closer. It's not exact. You don't have to be exact. You just want it to the right height so that you're not damaging the tape. If you are too low, you're going to cause a curl on the top side of the tape, because the tape is going to ride along the top edge here. It's going to damage the top side of the tape. And if you're too high, it's going to damage the bottom side of the tape. So you want to try and get it good. And the way to do it is it's all trial and error. You adjust it, and you go backwards and forwards on the tape. So if I hit my reverse search here, go back into forward, and I'm just looking at the tape as it passes here to see. It looks like there might be a little bit of a ripple coming in at the top of the tape. You see? If we zoom in, maybe not. It looks to be pretty close, and maybe just a little bit low. The adjustment is fairly critical, so I mean it doesn't take much. A half a turn will mean the difference between it being acceptable and unacceptable. So it's basically just there. You see? There's no curl happening in the tape down here. I don't see any warping in the tape between the pinch roller and the guide. So we're good. We are now properly aligned on the P6 guide. So I don't need to make any further adjustments. Because this is an aircraft type nut that's on here, it's got a plastic, a nylon collar on the top. So it's not going to unwind. You don't have to put a lock washer or anything on it. It's good to go. And all I need to do now is just put a little bit of my moly coat grease onto my loading motor here so that this doesn't seize up. And I should probably put some onto these rails here too for the tape path. And that will complete the top side lubrication of this Mitsubishi chassis. This applies to all these Mitsubishi chassis that were using this design. It's very, very common. As I said, we're going to make another video. I'm going to do the bottom side where we're going to take the bottom all apart and lubricate that. That's another hour-long video to do that right, to show you how to do that. And then maybe we'll have some fun with this machine, and I'll plant some faults in it, and we'll go through some fault finding. It's I'm at an unfair advantage though, because I know the fault. But it'll give you guys that are watching this an idea, give you a heads up. When I was a young technician in training, I worked for the Sony Corporation, and I trained as a factory certified Betamax technician, and that's the way our instructors taught us, was We did all the theory in the classroom on how the thing worked, and then they took machines and they planted faults. And then it was like, okay, you've been given the tools, you've been given the training, go figure out what we've done to it. And if you figured out the fault, you passed that course and moved on to the next one. And if you didn't, well, it was time to go back to school again. It was kind of a neat hands-on way of learning video, which I did in the early days of video. We're talking the early 80s, when home video was just in its infancy. And that's what I learned, and that's how I learned. I learned hands-on with faults that were planted on the machines to find. And that's what I'm trying to give back to the community when I teach you guys how to maintain your old vintage video equipment, because with the way that the industry is going, and nobody servicing these things, are servicing being few and far, there's not a lot of people that are still in the business of repairing these machines. There's a few of us diehards out there that we just can't seem to get away from it for whatever reason. But I don't think there's much in the way of young blood that's coming into the consumer electronics servicing industry anymore. And quite frankly, I can't blame them with everything gone disposable. But at the same time, saying that, there are millions upon millions of VHS machines out there still that people haven't disposed of. And there are millions of tapes. And some of these tapes that people have in their collections, if they're family videos, they're priceless. And we need to get them transferred over to a digital medium. And the only way to do that is to sometimes maintain your old machines, because you can't buy these things anymore. You can still, I think there's still a few basic VHS machines, but when it comes to Super VHS, for example, which is a format that I used in High 8, I use those two formats myself. You can't buy a Super VHS machine anymore. You can't buy a machine that will play a Super VHS tape. And Super VHS, even though the tape was the same size tape, it was an incompatible format. You could not play a Super VHS tape on a standard VHS machine. Now, I realize that there's going to be times where there's going to be parts worn out that you can't get, video heads and so forth that wear out that you're not going to be able to get anymore. So I would strongly advise people that have still got tape collections, get your tapes transferred over to a hard drive or to a DVD or to some other digital medium to store your once-in-a-lifetime recordings, because there will come a point in time where you're not going to be able to repair your VHS machines and you're not going to be able to get them. And then there's going to be a few people like myself who have got themselves quite a collection of machines, and you're going to be paying somebody else to transfer your tapes. And that is what I do on my own business, other than besides working for a large corporation that I work for. I do the home video transfers, and I'm getting an awful lot of people coming into me now with 8mm and High 8 tapes that they've shot of their kids growing up, you know, in the 90s and the 2000s. They've got all these High 8 tapes that they can't play because their camera is shot. They can't get their camera fixed. They can't buy a new one, and they're basically at a loss. And it can get quite expensive, especially if you've got a format that is becoming obsolete, like Beta. Beta is an obsolete format, and I can make quite a bit of money transferring Beta tapes over to DVD, because nobody else in my community has got a Beta machine that works. I have half a dozen of them. I have a half a dozen or more Super VHS machines, and I have everything. I have DAT, I have 8mm, I have High 8, I have Digital 8, I have Mini DV, I have HDV, I have 3/4 inch, I have Super VHS. I've got all the formats working for that process of transcribing video over to digital formats. But if you guys can do it yourself, if you can get your machine working and do it yourself, obviously you're going to save yourself a lot of money doing it. So that's the whole purpose of these videos. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll be doing another one in the next couple days so that we can take a look at the bottom side. I'll just pan my camera up here to show that this machine is playing a tape, and this is a tape that's not in good shape. It was one that was dropped and broken, so I would expect that with the shell being like that, there probably is a few instabilities in it, but it plays, and that's really all that matters, is that it does play. We'll see you in the next video. Take care for now.